Welcome to the first session of the Exploring Legal Futures webinar. We're very excited to have three panelists here. We have Luke Tyler, Matilda Gillis, and Emma Nott. And we are here to discuss demystifying law at Cambridge. So I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful panelists now to introduce themselves, tell us a bit about themselves and their backgrounds.
Do you want me to start, Elizabeth?
Yeah, please go ahead, Emma.
All right. Well, my name is Emma Nott. I am currently a circuit judge and I sit at Reading Crown Court mainly, but also at the Family Court from time to time. I went to Cambridge between 1991, graduating in 1994, having been the first in my family to go to university. My background prior to going to university, I didn't study law straight away, was I went to the same comprehensive school that my mother went to, but it was a very good comprehensive school and I was blessed with very good teachers who didn't see any reason why bright, enthusiastic pupils shouldn't apply to the best universities. And so I was encouraged, and I'm glad I was encouraged. I think perhaps not having a family who had gone to university before meant that I didn't really need any demystification. I had no clue what it was going to be like. So I was very, very open-minded. And I had a wonderful time at Cambridge. I switched and did law in my final year, having done classics for Tripos Part 1. That was mainly for fiscal reasons, actually. I couldn't have afforded to have done the extra year. And I knew by my third year that I wanted to be a barrister. So I joined the Part 1B cohort and ended up with a Tripos Part 1 and a Part 1B. I never got my Part 2, but I'm told I do have a complete degree. And then I went to bar school. I took a year out after bar school to work in advertising, mainly to earn money to fund pupillage. And then I spent 20 years at the criminal bar before going to the bench. So that's my background, or a whistle-stop tour of it.
Thanks very much, Emma. Matilda, would you like to introduce yourselves next?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi everyone. My name is Matilda Gillis. I am a fellow at Corpus Christi College here at Cambridge. I'm also an access officer at the university, and I'm an affiliated lecturer at the faculty as well. So my main research is in human rights law and international law. I also do some immigration law, and I teach criminal law, international humanitarian law, and also international law at the moment. My story is a bit different to both Luke and Emma in that I didn't go to undergrad Cambridge. As you can hopefully tell from my accent, although I'm recovering from a cold, so apologies in advance for my more husky voice, but I did my undergraduate degrees in Australia at the Australian National University in political science and also law, so an LLB undergraduate degree. After that, I went into practice for a couple of years as a solicitor in constitutional law, working for the Australian government solicitor. And then I finally made my way across to Cambridge for a master's degree and then my PhD. And then I stayed on as a research fellow and affiliated lecturer. So that's how I came to be at Cambridge and speaking to you today.
Luke, if you'd like to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, my turn. Hello, my name is Luke Tyler and I am a second year law student, also at Corpus Christi College. I come from a state grammar school, so that's a non-fee paying school. I'm a first generation uni student, so none of my parents or grandparents went to university, and I have no links in the family at all to law. So I completely understand any students who might be watching who have no idea what university, Cambridge, or law is like. I was in the exact same situation a couple of years ago, so I can completely relate. There's not much more to my background, unfortunately. It's quite notoriously brief.
That's quite all right. I think the most important thing, and why you're all here today, is that you're united by the law. So I think where we might want to start out is what prompted you to pursue first studying the law, and then for, I suppose, Emma and Matilda practicing.
Well, I suppose for me growing up, it's the law is all about you. It's everywhere. So I used to read the newspaper quite avidly, mainly because my parents encouraged me, actually. They get the Daily Telegraph every day. My mum insisted it was because the crossword was superior to that in the Times. And from the age of, I think, 12, when I went to secondary school, I was told, really, you need to be reading the newspaper. You need to know what's going on in the world around you. And I think it was just through something that simple that made me first fall in love with the law. Page 3 of the broadsheets is always the salacious stories about what's going on at the Old Bailey back then. George Carman was in full flight when I was growing up, and there were always very, very good newspaper reports about what was going on in the criminal world, and also what was going on in the libel world, because at that time there were also juries too. Human rights was nascent then. We didn't have so much in terms of what was reported in the UK, because of course we hadn't yet at that stage joined or signed up, if you like, to the Human Rights Act. That came later. But I think it was all around me, and I very much thought that that was an area of the world where I could contribute. I knew I was quite bright. I knew I could develop eloquence. I wasn't anywhere near fully formed, even at 25, and still less at 15. But I knew it was something that I could work on. And so that was it for me. It was all around me. And that's why I wanted to start.
I think I'm exactly the same as Emma, in the sense I wanted to understand the world. I wanted to understand everything that was happening, what was happening in the news, what was, if you go into a shop, that's illegal, and buy something, that's a legal transaction. I wanted to understand that. I think as well, practically speaking, I want to do a degree that led to a job. I think I loved the idea of kind of just doing politics or history or one of those disciplines. I mean, in Australia, it's quite different because we can do dual degrees, but I did want to be able to go into a profession after doing my undergraduate degree and kind of have that stability and in terms of career and just kind of something to go to. I think as well, it's all very well we say, we became lawyers, but law also opens you up to so many different degrees. And I think it's part of that, because it's a degree that lets you understand your world and what's happening. You can go into policy, you can be a lawyer, you can, there are so many different things you can do. And I think going into practice specifically, I mean, I obviously moved away from practice after a few years to go into academia. But practice, I mean, it's exciting being in a courtroom. As Emma, I can see Emma nodding, but it is. I mean, it's, you see people from all walks of life, you see matters from all walks of life. I don't think that excitement goes away. I mean, even in advice work, as a solicitor who doesn't go to court, that's exciting too. It's very dynamic. It's always changing. It's a really exciting subject.
I wish that I had some completely different reason to say why I went into law, but I feel like I'm going to say largely the same thing. I think, as they said, law is all around. I think I obviously grew up in a time where law was constantly on the TV, whether it be in the news, whether it be in a drama. And whenever I saw it, I was very curious as to how accurate it was. So I started to sort of research the law, realised that in reality, especially in this country, there's far less people screaming objection in a courtroom. But I realised that despite it not being exactly what you see in TV dramas, it was still something which really interested me. And then especially as I sort of got into sixth form, there were lots of protests going on around the world, which raised their own legal issues. And the more that I looked into them, the more that I realised I was just researching the law more and more, just naturally, didn't even realise I was doing it at the time. So it just felt sort of the natural degree to follow on from all of that.
Yeah, definitely. I think to your point about it not being, the courtroom drama of barristers shouting back and forth at each other, what other sorts of things do you think that the three of you kind of expected law to be, or maybe, that the salacious portion of the newspaper suggested it might be, and do you think that it lived up to that for you?
I think a lot of it, actually, in terms of atmosphere and drama and tension, absolutely, it's there on a day-to-day basis. I spent 20 years in the criminal courts, and even the magistrates' courts when I was cutting my teeth. Going down there, the adrenaline that you have going through you when you get to your feet, whether it's the first time or the 81st time, when you're about to cross-examine somebody, when you've been working all night preparing a perfectly honed cross-examination that you've cut and cut and cut, so you've only got a dozen questions which or hope are really going to do the trick. That atmosphere, it is electric, even at that low level. And then, of course, the more the cases that are high profile, very, very sad cases, of course. The criminal cases we've had recently this year have been particularly sad, with Lucy Letby, with the 2 young people who killed Brianna Guy. Those cases have a drama and a tension, but also a seriousness all of their own, which actually any TV drama can't replicate. It's not half as dramatic on the television, actually, as it is sometimes in those moments. Even now in the Crown Court, and I've sat now as a judge for nearly 6 years, I'm not invested in any jury verdict anymore, because it's nothing to do with me. I'm not prosecuting the case. I'm not defending the case. I'm simply making sure the trial is fair. Even in my role as arbiter, when the words are said, my clerk says, will the jury foreman please stand, or the defendant please stand, when the verdicts are about to be delivered, there are butterflies in my stomach. There is almost like a ghost that walks across my back, and every person in the courtroom who's invested in it one way or another, and everybody in the courtroom generally is, whether it's the barrister, the solicitor's clerk, the member of the press, the probation officer, everybody feels exactly the same, that's a tension that you can't replicate. So in many ways, the cliches are true, but that's not the only reason to come to the bar, that's for sure.
No, I think Emma's exactly right. I mean, as a counterpoint, I would say one thing that, just to demystify something, there are subjects that are boring. And I say that's a very subjective opinion. I'm looking at Luke because he's one of my students, and I think he may agree with me on some of them. But you will have to read a lot. I mean, you'll have to read a lot of boring cases. And as an academic, I would say there's always something interesting to pull from them. But you may find yourself in a library, in the evening, or when you don't want to be there, reading a boring case on, I'll show my bias and say that I find, contract law to be drier than Luke's looking appalled, but drier than others, for instance. I mean, human rights law is really my area in criminal law, as Emma said, but it can be dry. I think another thing to demystify is, I think there is this perception that, lawyers are very, they're all in lectures in suits and serious people, and, there's a certain vibe or stereotype of a lawyer. I think the moment you would walk into the law faculty here, you would see that it's a very diverse group of people. People are interested in different things. People come from different backgrounds. It's a very kind of lively community, and it's not that necessarily, just serious business suits vibe, I would say. But Luke, obviously being a current student, would be able to say if I'm right or not.
No, I think that's completely accurate, with the exception that I actually find contract law quite interesting. I'm sorry, Matilda. For me, it has to be land law that I really struggle to motivate myself to read. But I think that is largely sort of the misconception. I came into law particularly interested in constitutional and criminal law. But obviously I'm here studying for 3 years, and criminal and constitutional are both first-year papers. So obviously, if I hadn't known going in, then I would have known exactly what I was going to do for half of my first year, and then the rest of it would have all been a big mystery. I think people forget when they're looking at law just how broad what we study is. And as Matilda said, some of it is really interesting. Some of it, with every subject, is not as interesting as the rest. But that's part of what I do like about Cambridge. We have quite a lot of options in order to minimize the ones which I find not as interesting. So I've been able to choose ones which I think are quite interesting, which Matilda will be glad to hear, considering I take international and human rights law. Yes.
Would you guys be able to tell me kind of a little bit more about the structure of the Cambridge Law course? It's over 3 years, you've got a lot of different options, but can you go more in depth about that?
I guess I can take this one if everyone agrees. So as you said, Lizzie, it's a 3-year course. There is an option to do a year abroad. So actually, Luke, I hope it's okay I'm saying this.
Yeah, that's
excellent. Luke will be going to Singapore for a year. So his degree overall, sorry, I say this being Luke's old director of studies. So this is why I know Luke's plan in particular. But he'll be going to Singapore for a year, and it will take 4 years overall then to complete his degree with that year abroad. There are certain compulsory subjects you have to do. So you have to do criminal law, for instance. You have to do contract, land, constitutional, these kind of subjects. There are a lot more that I'm not listing, But then, as Luke said, then you can choose your electives. So human rights law, for instance, is an elective. International law is, family law, subjects like this. So there is quite a bit of room to be able to do your own thing within the degree. But I mean, a lot of students often complain about the compulsories, but I think, firstly, I think they're foundational. You have to do them to understand other subjects. And also, I think they're always better than you think. You know, I remember, as Luke was talking about contract, I remember thinking corporations law would be something I would hate and, you know, dislike. And then I remember loving kind of going through the different provisions, and the cases were quite interesting. So the compulsories, you have to do them, but they are always better than you think as well. You'll also, I mean, I won't give too much detail, but just the structure of Cambridge is obviously that you have lectures in big groups, which is with the whole cohort, so people from all different colleges in Cambridge. And then you'll also have this small group teaching called supervisions. So that's when you are with one other person, one other student, and a supervisor. So that's someone who's a lecturer or a fellow at one of the colleges who will take you in smaller groups and just discuss what was discussed in the lecture, the readings, take you through those cases. And there are different styles as to how that happens, but that's across the degree.
Yeah, one thing that I just wanted to add, because I know that I reckon if a lot of people are looking at applying to Cambridge, they've probably also got Oxford in their mind as well. One thing that I liked about Cambridge as opposed to Oxford is the exam format. We have our exams at the end of every year. In your second and third year, they're combined for your grade. Whereas at Oxford, I understand this was something which didn't personally appeal to me, but it might appeal to people watching. You have exams midway through your first year just to ensure that you're sort of settled in. But then your main exams, which your grade is on, are ruled entirely at the end of your final year, which to me was something I would much rather sort of be tested as I go. Whereas I know some people would much rather be able to relax a bit more throughout their time and then have sort of a big block of exams at the end.
Yeah, I suppose throughout your degree, obviously you've got a lot going on in terms of the courses that you're taking. What sort of time commitment do you think that you'd be put in, or Matilda, perhaps, that you would expect Luke to put in? Not that those two will match up.
I think I will defer to Luke. I would say I very much advocate a healthy work-life balance. As Luke will know, I give them all a talk on sleeping for 8 hours a night. It is, I will be upfront, law is a lot of work. It is more work. I mean, people are always going to disagree with what I'm going to say, but I think it is a lot more work than certain other humanities subjects. I would say, obviously, that that's worth it, that you'll get more out of your degree, but it is a lot of work. You'll be reading a lot. It's obviously not like, so STEM, science subjects, where you have more of a collaborative workload or sharing work. It is, as in there's collaboration in the sense that the corpus, sorry, not just the corpus, but each college group, there'll be a group of law students who, will be kind of your cohort. But it is a lot of work. So yeah, would you agree with that, Luke? I mean, Luke will.
Yeah, no, I definitely, checking I'm not muted. I will definitely agree with that. I think that's something that's very unique to obviously humanities in general, but law given the gravity of the work, because a lot of the other subjects which have similar workloads in terms of STEM, so you're looking at sort of engineering, medicine, physics, that a lot of their time will be, for example, it will be more practical. They might be in a lab, they might be doing a dissection. I don't know what medics get up to. But it means that sort of there's someone there looking over them to ensure that they are doing the work. But with law, it's a lot of self-motivation. There is no one sat in the library ensuring you're doing your reading. It's just, it will be realised if you get to a supervision and you haven't done it, or it will eventually get realised at the end of the year when you get to the end and realise that you've fallen behind on work. As for how much, at the moment I just have between 10 and 15 hours of lectures per week. Some days I have none, some days I have 4 or 5, so it very much varies. As for how much reading you do separate of that, it's very much dependent on the person, how much work you can get through. I would say if I had a day where I spent 4 hours in lectures, I would spend around the same or more doing my independent reading. But that's obviously, that changes day to day. Some days where I don't have any lectures, I will spend pretty much the whole day reading in the library. But you can still have a life. I don't want to scare anyone away who's hearing me say this. Part of what is the reason why we have such work is because we have these shorter 8-week terms, which does then mean we get much longer holidays than other universities. So it's all sort of swings and roundabouts, but you can very much still have a life, I assure you, with that sort of workload.
I think it's really important to have a life at university, particularly where you are taking a degree that is quite reading heavy. And law is, having done classics for 2 years and then switched to do law, I would say, to be fair, there was not a huge difference in the amount of work I put in, but there was a difference in the way that I worked, because I was doing much more essay based work, obviously doing classics, and there was also a lot of reading because I had to keep on top of the language. And law, I had to get my head around doing really more lectures, actually, just so I can understand the basics of the topics. I was less inclined to go to lectures when I was doing classics, which I was more familiar with, than when I was doing law, which I was completely new to. But having said that, it's vitally important, I think, that you do have a life, that you do go out several nights a week. I played in the college hockey team when I was at college. All 3 years I was at college. I was a JCR president in my final year. I did various other things. There was a Christmas panto that I got involved in, I seem to remember, in the final year. I took on an awful lot in that last year, and I got very little sleep. But I think you've got 3 years at university, and you've got a whole lifetime after university to work. And you need to spend part of your 3 years at university working out how you work, because you've got another 40 odd years afterwards. And if you don't get that balance right early on, then actually you're going to really pay for it when you're in your mid-30s. So try to live hard, play hard, work hard in those 3 years that you're at university, because that's a really good blueprint for how you're going to carry on. Most people at university won't have dependents. You won't have children. Some people will, but the vast majority of you probably who are looking to do law as an undergraduate degree at Cambridge, these will be 3 years of your life where you're free of any other commitments. No one's depending on you to bring money home. No one's depending on you to read them a bedtime story. You manage your own time without any outside influences, as it were, or any outside people telling you what to do, apart from the fact that you've got to be at a lecture at 10 or you've got to be at a supervision at 3. Those are your only points in your day where you actually have to be somewhere, and everything else you have to manage yourself. I think it's a privilege. I think it's a joy, and I think you should grab hold of it and make it work for you. But I don't fear that if you're doing law and someone else is applying to do English, that they're going to have an amazing social life and you're going to have a dreadful one, because that certainly wasn't my experience. The lawyers, the medics, they were the people who were staying up to 2 a.m, drinking the bar dry a lot of the time. So they certainly knew how to socialise. Sorry, that's probably not what you wanted me to say, Matilda, is it?
I think that it's realistic to think about the social life that you have at university. And to be honest, I've been a university student too. It wouldn't be much without it. It would be quite dull and dry if you were, again, in the library until 2 a.m. every day. I suppose, what sorts of things in terms of Cambridge, because I think a lot of people do think that you come to Cambridge and you sit in the library and you read and then you go to sleep and then you wake up and maybe you go to rowing at 6 a.m. But then you go back to lectures. What sorts of things, when you were applying, did you expect, or if you might not have expected anything at all? And do you think that Cambridge and its kind of mystique, I suppose, did that live up to what you thought it might?
It's probably I don't know if it will ever changed a lot in 25 or 30 years, actually. But I know when I went up, going up from a comprehensive, going up from a background where I didn't know anyone in my family who'd gone to university. So my peers were all going, or a lot of them were going off to university. So I was worried when I came up that it might be inaccessible to me. Not work-wise, I knew I'd be all right on the work, but I was worried that I wouldn't understand the codes, the sort of Brideshead Revisited type of thing. I remember learning the terms, Michaelmas term and Trinity term, things like that, the language. A lot of the people who'd been to public schools were much more familiar straight away with things like dining and gowns and all of the formalities. And those were aspects that I initially found intimidating. I think you have to embrace that. I think if you're coming up to Cambridge, then and it's not your background, then you should embrace it, because it's part of the Cambridge experience. You shouldn't fear it. But then, of course, when I got up, I realised that actually about half my year group were in exactly the same position that I was in. And from my understanding, certainly speaking to the master at Selwyn, there's been an increase year on year in the number of state school pupils who are applying and also being given places, or being gaining places, earning places. So I think you will find your tribe, but I think it's highly understandable if you're coming up and you don't know anyone else who's coming to the university or to your college, and it's not your background, and you're from a state school, or you're worried that you perhaps won't have as much money as other people to keep yourself going, or whatever. Don't worry, because there'll be plenty of other people in that position, and you will find your tribe. But Luke will be able to give you the more recent.
No, I agree with a lot of what you said. Especially, I did worry when I got there, coming from someone who's never known anyone at Cambridge, that I was going to get there and everyone would be able to it would just click for them and it wouldn't for me. But when I sort of got here, I realised that whilst when it came to some things I didn't know what I was doing, I found that everyone sort of didn't know what they were doing, and we all muddled through together at the beginning. Even people I thought, if they've studied law at A-level, that'll be a huge advantage for them, got there, they realised it was nothing like studying law at university. Obviously, there were things which they might have known, this little nugget of information, which I didn't, but I don't feel like it meant that they had a proper advantage over me. And it was just sort of fun to figure it all out together. And I feel when you start at university, as with any university, Freshers Week, you will meet so many new people. You'll meet people at your college. You'll meet people from societies that it will be difficult not to find a group who you properly settle with, because this is quite a large university as they go. So there are people everywhere. You will definitely meet the right people.
And it doesn't matter if you don't like something either. You just try it. I went to the union. I went once. I hated it and never went back. It doesn't matter. I've been. It wasn't for me. You've got to do things to decide that whether they're for you or not. And if they are, that's brilliant. And if they're not, well, it doesn't matter. You haven't lost anything, apart from maybe an evening or a half an hour here or there. But if you don't try it, you won't know whether you're going to like it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Transitioning a little bit, I wonder if we could talk a bit about the actual process of, getting entry to Cambridge. So obviously, everybody has to apply. Emma, you'll have applied for Classic, so it might be a bit different. And we've adopted some new tests since you were applying, such as the LNAT. But Matilda, coming from an admissions standpoint, and Luke from also the other side of the admissions, I wonder if you guys could talk a bit about your experience of the application process at Cambridge, and Emma as well, talking, interviews will still be quite similar and perhaps just as much of an almost taboo subject. So I wonder if the three of you could kind of talk a bit about what you thought the expectation for the application might be like, and then what it actually was.
So I can go first, just talking a bit about the process, if that helps. So what you'll do is you'll apply to Cambridge, and Luke, feel free to fact check me on anything. You'll apply to Cambridge, you'll put in an application form that'll have your statement, what your predicted grades are, what you got at GCSEs, these kind of things. Obviously, if you're an international student, you will not have A levels, but you will have an equivalent that we will get in your application form. Then you'll also do the LNAT test at some stage. That has two components. One is an essay, one is a multiple choice test. Fast forward, we will look at you apply to a college, I should say. So, or you can put in an application where we will sort you into a college. You will get interviewed by a college, but you can put down the college you would like to be interviewed at. Then that college will look through all the applications they get. We will make a deselection process based on various factors, but we will decide who we want to interview and who will not go through to interview. Then some colleges have gone back to in-person interviews, some are still online. So whichever method or mode that your interview takes place, you will usually have one or two interviews at the college, and then eventually you will find out the result of that interview, whether it converts to an offer, a conditional offer, or not a place at Cambridge. So that is a very simplified process. It's tricky discussing this as a general process just because every college will do something slightly different. So I can speak to the Corpus, what we do at Corpus, the Corpus experience, we give 2 interviews. There are 2 interviewers in each interview, and those interviews will differ. So for instance, one interview might look at a case and you'll be asked to discuss a case. Another one might ask, why do you want to read law? You know, these kind of questions. So it really differs per college, but at least at Corpus, this is how we conduct our interviews.
I'm just going to interject right here to plug a really good resource. It's called Inside Uni, and it was created by uni students at Oxford and Cambridge for uni students prospective uni students who are considering applying. And what it has is a collection of a bunch of different people who've actually applied for and interviewed for Oxford and Cambridge at lots of different colleges, and they've recorded their experiences, not in really specific detail, but more so in kind of like broad concepts, so that you can go back and you can look at how people have experienced different colleges, again, both at Oxford and Cambridge, and for all sorts of different subjects. So I think they do have pretty much every college and every subject that you can think of under the sun. So Corpus is a really good example, and Matilda can talk more about that. But if you wanted to know how Pembroke or Pembroke Oxford interview, that might be a good place to go. I suppose continuing on the interviews, Luke, I don't know if you had a really positive interview experience or just a very neutral one, but was it kind of what you thought it would be?
Well, I remember when I'd spoken to people who got in, they told me that they enjoyed their interview, and I thought that they were crazy because I thought to myself, this is going to be one of the most stressful days of my life. I don't understand how I could possibly enjoy it. And then I finished my interview, and I remember my mum came into the room where I was doing it. She said, how was it? And I said, I really loved it. I really enjoyed it. And I think that's the main thing. At the end of the day, this is an academic who's potentially going to be teaching you. They want to know that you can talk about the law, that you are passionate about the law, and that you have good ideas about the law. You don't have to know anything going in. The closest that I got is that I studied politics, but I had pretty much no knowledge of actual legal principles, any legal cases. I simply had some reading to do before my interview. I read the interview and I discussed it, and it was quite a back and forth. I didn't feel like I was necessarily having to try and impress every time. I just said what I thought my opinion was on the case, and then I'd be challenged on it, and then I would have to see, did that challenge change my view in any way? Did I think that I need to change my view, or did I think that my original viewpoint stood? And as long as I felt I could defend myself at every point, I felt like it was a very productive discussion. So I think that, yeah, I know that some people worry about, how much law do I need to know? Not really anything. If you, as Emma said earlier, if you follow the news, that's pretty much as good as you can get, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I'd say 2 things as well. For law, if you wanted to do some background reading, what you could do is go onto, I think it's a government website or it's a courts and judiciary website. But if you put into Google or your search engine, courts and judiciary or courts and tribunals, judgments, every day, every week, they will be putting judgments up. You don't need to read them all. You don't even need to read one a week, but every now and again, there will be a judgment that goes up in a case that is making the news, whether it's on Brexit or whether it's Joe Phoenix against the university, Open University. You will find something that you will be interested in. So I wouldn't just read reams and reams of cases because you think a question might come up at interview. That won't happen. But if you get used to the discipline of reading cases, first of all, if they interest you, then you may have something interesting to say about them. Secondly, you get used straight away to reading judgments, and there will be a lot of that in 3 years. So if you find you don't like it, then that's probably a good reason not to think again about whether you apply to law. But it will get you into that discipline. And my final word on interview, and I think this is true whether you're interviewing for Cambridge or you're interviewing for a job or you're interviewing to be a volunteer at the local care home, whoever is interviewing you is thinking, do I want to spend, in the university's case, 3 years of my life with this person? Do I want this person in my supervision group, in my lectures for the next 3 years? What is this person going to add to my university experience as a lecturer? So just try to engage with them. And if you do try to engage with them, they will want you back. They'll want to see, even if you think you've mucked everything up totally. I remember mucking up a question and feeling awful about it. In my classics interview, I just got the wrong end of the stick about something. And I realised it, and it was fine. But of course, to me, it wasn't fine. I'd made the terrible, terrible error. But in fact, I had a discussion with the director, who became my director of studies, and we discussed it. And I think he just saw something in the fact that I was happy to discuss it. And also, I didn't fall into floods of tears when my mistakes pointed out. That's the other thing. Have resilience early on, because that's a good trick to have for life. So just when you're being interviewed, don't focus too much on yourself, because you know what you bring to the table, but the person interviewing you doesn't. And they just want to know if you're likable, personable, somebody they want to spend time with.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of questions that we've had in the chat, and also in the questions that were submitted earlier by people who were enrolling, were about sort of extracurriculars and what sort of things you guys would suggest people doing, especially if they're considering law. So what sort of things might help set somebody up beyond doing those readings and really engaging with the law at a theoretical and also, within the world?
I think just do whatever you enjoy. I think you have your whole degree and life then to read about law. I think, as Emma and Luke both said, I think reading the news is very helpful for law. I mean, if you want a very accessible book that I think is interesting, The Secret Barrister is a very good book that will, I quite like it as well because it's an easy read as well. But it's very interesting about the criminal justice system. But really, I mean, in terms of extracurriculars, do whatever you enjoy. I mean, playing hockey or playing football or, that is better, just for your well-being and if that's what you like to do. But I think it shows conviction and, it's really interesting to discuss that as well. So I'm just hesitant to say do a specific extracurricular activity because it's just not what we're looking for. Really, what we really care about is in the interview is that you're yourself, that you show drive and interest in law, that you can reason. And as Emma said, we never really care about the answer you get to in a certain question. We care about how you reason and how you think about an answer. And I mean, the best interviews will always be those people who are themselves and don't try and be a certain person in the interview. But yeah, I wouldn't be choosing extracurriculars. From my admission standpoint, I would find it much. I mean, I don't read cases in my spare time for fun, so I wouldn't expect someone at A levels to be doing that as an extracurricular, for instance. Luke may disagree. He might read cases in his spare time.
I don't. No, all that I really did when it came to applications, I did, I think I had a model United Nations, which I'd done with my school. I'd done a moot at my school. But obviously these are things which I was very lucky my school was able to offer. I think if I was in a situation where my school couldn't have offered it, I think I would have just sufficed with, I'd read a couple of articles and I'd read The Secret Barrister. Just reading like that, if your school does offer opportunities, take them. Also, there's a lot that you will find online opportunities. Things like, I know that, as I said, Model United Nations, there's a lot of them online run by particular universities. They'll do them for Year 12 students. Just get involved in that sort of thing. They're quite easy to find. Just have a quick Google and I'm sure you'll come across plenty of good stuff if you do want to sort of just increase your ability to speak well, understand sort of world politics, or in case of like mooting and stuff, just understanding the law.
I think the important thing about extracurricular is that you have something. that you have something apart from academia. It doesn't really matter what it is, whether it's you just get out and you jog every morning and that's your thing, or you are a grade A pianist, or you are part of the local chamber orchestra, or you're part of the dog walking association. It doesn't really matter, but you should have something extracurricular because it makes you a much more rounded person. Excuse me. I think I would also say, and this is harder perhaps at your age and stage, but I would look to always be giving something back if you can. Again, because it will make you a better person. It will make you more empathetic. It will make you, whether you become a lawyer or whatever you do, whether you go into business, it will make you a better businessman or a better barrister, because that's how you meet and understand vulnerabilities. And I know when I have people who apply to come and sit, I often get students who will write and say, can I come and sit on the bench with you? The people who I'm more inclined to give that opportunity to are those who will say that they spend their Saturday mornings, helping with guide dogs for the blind or something along those lines, or people who spend a gap year. I mean, not everyone can afford a gap year, and those people who often have a gap year go and have to work, so it's not easy. But if people have had time out of school or whatever, for whatever reason, if they've done something charitable, or they've done something, and I'm not talking about going to Peru to find themselves or whatever, but actually going down to the local scope shop and spending, their Saturday mornings selling secondhand books on behalf of a local charity, or going up and helping the Mothers Union or the Women's Union with their tray bakes or whatever. Just giving something back into the community will help you understand the community that you live in, and it will give you something to talk about that is truly, I think, properly impressive. That's just my bias, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got a little bit over 10 minutes left, and I thought we would switch to some questions, because I think that there are some that will be really, really relevant and really pertinent. One that I've had in a few different ways, so I'm going to try to format it, is whether you three think that law is a diverse career, because one of the people submitting their question says that sometimes they worry that they don't see themselves as the typical lawyer, and how obviously I don't know if there is a typical lawyer, but what do you three think?
I don't think you can get a more diverse profession, frankly, other than teaching, I suppose. What's a lawyer? I suppose we think about a typical lawyer. Is that George Carman? Is that the person who stands up in his posh suit and I put it to you and all of those things? There is actually no typical lawyer. There's no typical barrister. There's no typical solicitor. And the law is so diverse, whether you are doing the typical criminal, not typical, the more obvious to the public. If you ask a member of the public what they think a barrister is, they will think of somebody standing up in the Old Bailey, perorating to a jury. You may not think about the human rights lawyer who's arguing about the rights of people in a country that's far-flung and nothing to do, you'd have thought, with the UK, except we do, in fact, have areas of law where we're arguing in and up to the Supreme Court in that area. You'll have your tort lawyers, your public lawyers, the people who want to fight for people who are on benefits and have had the benefits cut. And you'll have people who will go up to even citizens advice bureaus and help there, or take them to tribunals. You've got more and more diversity. You've got asylum seekers, all of that side. You've got the commercial law. You've got, the real problem, I think, actually with law is when you've got your law degree, how on earth are you going to narrow it down and decide what you want to do? Because you've got so many options. If you come to Cambridge because you want to be a criminal lawyer, then it may be when you leave Cambridge, you still want to be a criminal lawyer. But chances are you won't. Chances are you will have sat in one of Matilda's lectures and think, no, oh my God, I want to do human rights. I want to do international relations. Or you'll sit in somebody else's lecture and think, God, I didn't even know that area of law was a thing. Sports law didn't exist really when I was at university. That's a huge area now. There are a lot of sports lawyers are people who were actually Premiership, well, perhaps not footballers, but they were, Olympians. They are now fantastic sports lawyers. They didn't even think they were academic, but their background and their knowledge of the world and their hunger for finding answers and fairness just set them down that path. So you will find people who are lawyers who have come from all different walks of life and all different backgrounds. I can't think of a more diverse profession, frankly. No, enough from me.
No, I agree completely with Emma in that in response to the question, I thought, well, who is the typical lawyer? And I wouldn't really be able to tell you. I think obviously there have been issues with the profession in the past. There's no denying that. But now, as Emma said, it's incredibly diverse in terms of content of work, in terms of the people going into law. I think, yeah, exactly as Emma said, it was the same reaction of who is the typical lawyer. I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Yeah. And it may be that I've misunderstood the question, because when I was talking about diversity, I was talking about diversity of discipline. And if the question is the profession diverse? Well, again, it depends really across professions. I don't know about academia. In terms of the bar, it's not as diverse as it could be. We don't have half as many people as we should have from the lower socio-economic backgrounds, from ethnic minorities. Women routinely get paid far less than men, and that's an ongoing problem. So we do have diversity issues there. The employed bar is less problematic, and the solicitor's profession does an awful lot better in terms of diversity of individual. So there's a lot of work in progress there's a lot of work in progress, and there's a lot of work to be done. But it's getting better and better and better, and people are alive to diversity issues now and actively trying to do things about it. So, for example, the Inns hold a lot of scholarships, and they've increased their scholarship funds by many, many multiples over the last 10, 15 years to try to encourage and make sure that bright minds who come from backgrounds that couldn't otherwise afford to train to become barristers actually can, so that poverty won't hold people back if they are bright.
Yeah, and I'll just sort of jump in to provide sort of an experience at university. I think if people speak about sort of the typical lawyer, because I was always told that a typical lawyer was just someone who was good at arguing. But that's just one aspect. I think there are people who study law who are far more interested in the philosophical side of it, and they really excel in things like jurisprudence and in their essays. There are people who are quite good at advocacy and putting forward a case, and those are the sort of people who like to get involved in mooting. But because it is so broad, no matter what sort of student you are, no matter sort of where you're from, there will be an area of law which perfectly suits you, in my opinion, because I've done a bit of mooting because I quite enjoy that side of things. And I found that when it comes to the philosophical side of things, I steer as far away from that as I possibly can, because that's just not the sort of student that I am. But then there are students who are the complete opposite of me who do just as well, if not better. So honestly, I don't think there's such thing as the typical lawyer or typical law student in my case.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is, from three really interesting places in how you've engaged with the legal community. Another question is, I suppose tied into that, but how do you three think that the legal field is breaking down socioeconomic barriers for those people who might sometimes be excluded from the legal field or not included as fully as they could be?
Well, I think, as Emma said, it starts with, scholarships, providing funding for people to go to university first, to then go to the bar. As Emma said, the Inns of Court have a huge range of funding opportunities, but it also is about starting at law school and admissions and making it more diverse, having diverse selection panels, having diverse people in the profession. It's an ongoing process, but I mean, for me, I think a huge thing is providing the opportunity, providing the funding opportunity, and making sure that opportunities are there. I'm not sure if you would agree, Emma, with that take, but...
No, absolutely. It's a difficult question to answer because it differs from area to area. And we do have a problem with retention at the bar, the criminal bar in particular. Well, in fact, in the publicly paid bar, as it were, in sort of family law as well, because it's not sufficiently well paid to be able to keep people. And when I came to the bar, you were still able to make enough money at the bar, at the criminal bar, to keep yourself afloat without a private income. I'm not so sure that remains the case. And I think that it's very difficult to come to the criminal bar in the current climate with 60, 70,000 pounds worth of debt from university, and perhaps without a partner who also doesn't earn or isn't earning very much. So I think people are making hard choices. And I think we see students, bar students, making hard choices. They might want to come to the criminal bar, but in reality, the money will be made in the commercial bar or in chancery. And so a lot of choice now is the bar students themselves are voting with their feet and are going to the more highly paid areas of the bar, where traditionally the criminal bar is we've always had the first pick because it's so exciting. People do want to come to the criminal bar. They have done traditionally. So I think that's an interesting way of looking at things and turning things around. I think you probably do have to make quite hard-nosed decisions, age 23, 24, coming out of school, coming out of bar school, not simply what area of law do you like, but what area of law is sustainable for your lifestyle. And if you want to ski twice a year and you want to put your children in public school, then you're not going to want to be a criminal lawyer or a family lawyer. If social justice is your thing and actually what you want is a roof over your head and to be able to go to the south of France once a year in a caravan, then come to the criminal bar or the family bar, because you earn a living, but you certainly won't earn a fortune. And so that's why I think the bar probably can be a bit divisive still socio-economically, because there's a huge difference in what you're going to earn as a shipping lawyer and what you're going to earn doing Children Act proceedings against a local authority when they're trying to take someone's children into care. So those are all decisions that you as individuals need to make when you are at the stage when you're career planning. But at the bar, it's for itself, and the judiciary and the solicitor's profession, from what I have seen of it, are all hugely welcoming. There have been problems with reporting, with misconduct, with the old boys' club. I think Elizabeth asked me to join this panel because I had written an article recently in Council where I just touched upon some of those issues. But they're getting better, they're changing. Visibility, social media, accountability, those are all very good tools that good professions use to monitor their employees, as it were.
Wonderful. So we do only have about a minute left, so I'm unfortunately going to have to call it there. But thank you so much to our panelists. It's been really wonderful, even for me, hearing a bit more about all of your experiences and how you've become who you are today. To all of our attendees, thank you very much for joining. I know that there are some questions that we haven't had the chance to answer yet. And so if you do have a question that hasn't been answered, I would invite you to send them to me. My email is outreach@law.cam.ac.uk. And I will do my best to answer them, or I'll forward them to somebody who will be able to. Again, thank you all very much for attending. And we hope to see you in some of our future webinars and events. Thank you all.